I'm Bailey Kofer, and I will be going over hymn texture today. Hymn texture is a form of SATB vocal writing or part writing, and it differs from choral texture in that the voice leading is not independent, it is dependent, meaning that all the parts are typically moving together and sometimes in the same exact motion to make it more easily playable and singable. The hymn we will be looking at today is Jesus Paid It All, which is in the key of E flat. The first thing we will be going over in hymn texture is this lovely bass note. In hymn texture, the bass note is playing the root of whatever chord is featured in that measure. So for the first three measures, we're playing a one chord, which is E flat, G, B flat. And that bass note is playing the E flat for an entire three measures up until we transition into a five chord, which is B flat, D, F, and it's going to play that B flat all the way until we make it to the last measure in this bar for that one chord again and that E flat once again. Another thing about our hymn texture is that for the soprano line, which is the very top note, we sing the melody throughout the entire hymn in most hymns because it is hymn texture. And that means that the alto and the tenor part are the inner voices. And the inner voices have the chance to skip on occasion. And when they do skip, it's either to fill in that chord voicing to make it easier to play, or to add a single harmony to make that melody just a little bit more interesting, maybe add some flair once in a while. And here you can see that this is a B flat, which is not in the chord that we have in the bottom, this one chord. Therefore, it's just making a single harmony and not filling in voicing for the chord this time. Speaking of non-chord tones, another thing about hymn texture is that when you have non-chord tones, such as this third right here, we have a C and an A flat, which is not in this one chord, making it a non-chord tone. In hymn texture, when you have these non-chord tones, they're usually paired with at least one other part. So you'll see soprano and alto, or bass and tenor paired together playing a non-chord tone. But while two parts are playing a non-chord tone, two parts also have to be playing the chord tone. Just keep it in your mind and keep them equally matched together. So the bass and the tenor part are playing the chord tone while the alto and soprano are not playing a chord tone. One of the other things that makes hymn texture different from some of the other SATB part writing or vocal texture or any kind of texture is that the parallel, similar, oblique, and contrary motion don't matter. So we don't have to worry about parallel fifths or parallel octaves or any of that stuff that we usually would red flag and have to start the whole process over again. In hymn texture, you can have parallel octaves. As you can see, there's 1, 2, 3 all right beside each other, and there's 4 right beside each other in this measure right here, meaning that it really does not matter as long as it's easy to play and easy to sing and has a nice flow to it. We're not really concerned about any of those problems that we normally would be in some of the other textures. One of the other things that makes hymn texture different from chorale texture are the stems of each part's note. In choral texture, you'll see that the stems for the soprano note are pointing up, and the stems for the alto note are pointing down, and the stems for the tenor note are pointing up, and the stems for the bass note are pointing down. But in hymn texture, the alto and soprano part are connected with one single beam pointing up, and the bass and tenor are connected with one single beam pointed down. Once again, just making the process of writing in hymn texture simpler, less to worry about, less things to think about. It does make it sometimes seem a bit boring for some people, but it's never bothered me. And I think it's one of the more interesting textures to learn about simply because I've always liked hymns more than some of the other songs that we sing in today's time. But that's just a little bit about hymn texture, and thank you for listening.